Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Oh, wow. I see we have a bunch of live people right now. Awesome. Oh, and a ton more registered. Excited to see all these people. Don't be nervous. That's what I'm telling myself. Awesome. Awesome. We'll give it a couple of more minutes before we get started. I really got to find a way to get some nice intro music going in the beginning of this session. Feels a little bit awkward to me, but I think it's just because I'm sitting here talking to myself. Very excited to get started with Carolyn and Lauren today. I know we've had Nadine, thank you for your comment. I know we've had a couple of people reach out and say they're super excited about this talk, so really excited about this one. Okay. So like I said, hey everyone, and welcome to Tango's Women for Women in Tech Talks. This is where we explore the journeys of women in technology. My name is Alicia Gale, and as a reminder, the goal of the talk is for Tango to connect to the whole tech community as a whole, but to better understand the industry from the female perspective in particular, and of course to participate in the global conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we'll be talking a little bit more about today than I think we probably have in quite a few other talks. I'm really excited about that. Now, who is Tango? Tango is working to become the premier nearshore staff augmentation and product development consultancy. And while our culture has always been incredibly inviting, we took kind of an honest inventory in 2020 and decided to start making some very intentional changes, particularly around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So again, very excited to touch on that topic today. But if you're an engineer and you're based in Latin America and you're looking for a place to really make your mark and see cultural diversity change firsthand, please check out our website. It's tango.io, and we'd love to have you. We have tons and tons of openings right now, so I know our talent acquisition team would love to hear from you. Everything from IT specialists to directors of engineering to senior software developers, anything, it's probably on there. And then as always, keep an eye out for Carla, our amazing organizer and founder of the event. She will be dropping helpful resources in the comments for us as we go along. So as we talk about things, she'll research them and drop the links in there for us. Today, we are joined by Lauren, Director of Engineering at Element 84, and Carolyn, who handles product strategy and innovation at IFundWomen. Both of these women have made amazing strides in their career to get where they are today, and I'm very excited to, and they are very excited to share their advice and insights. So let's get started and bring on Lauren. Give me 1 second. Hey, Lauren.
Hey. Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Could you give a little introduction about yourself and your journey thus far in technology?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Lauren Frederick, and I am the Director of Engineering at Element 84. Like you said, Element 84 is a women-owned company, and we do professional services. We're focused in the geospatial area. One of our values is our work benefits our world. So we are trying to pick up work all the time that makes a positive impact on the world. So I've been there for a little over 5 years now. I started back in programming, back in college. I always loved programming. I switched my major at the end of freshman year to computer science, and I have never looked back. I still love programming so much. It's like my passion. So I went from college into video games and worked on Madden for 4 years, Madden football, as I've switched industries a lot. I'm on my 4th job now. This is my first small company. I've always been at big companies. So I've done video games, Department of Defense, utility billing, and now I'm doing working as a subcontractor for NASA as an architect, doing pipelines for satellite data processing. So I've kind of been all over the place, but this is the longest I've ever been at a job. So I think, I found my spot.
Yeah, you've been with Element 84 for, I think I saw 5 years, 6 years
5
now?
years. Yeah, 5.
That's a pretty long stint. I've seen you've had quite a bit of growth while you're there as well. Congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you.
I love that when you're talking about all these different aspects of your past work, it's always things like Madden, and I'm working with NASA, and it's all these things that are just such strong like boys clubs. And I'm curious if you've run into that at all. Have you run into any kind of I know we're all shocked, but tell us a little bit more about it. Are there any particular instances where you found yourself in maybe like a little bit of an awkward situation and how you navigated it?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely more in the beginning of my career for sure. Like I tell my team now, they're like, we need like a story time. And I'm just like, back then things were just different because it was like 15 years ago. Like really, I think things have changed so much, but definitely at my internship, like I had a really, really rough time with that. Because like people would make all kinds of comments. And it was really tough. I used to feel like nauseous going to work every day. So that was really tough, like being so young, to navigate that really just when they were talking about an offer, I just said, don't bother. But, and then when I got to EA, the team had gotten like some kind of harassment training because I was joining the team because I was going to be the only woman on the team.
Oh, and
wow. I mean, it was like a rough culture at times, but I also had like really, really good friends who looked out for me too. So it was a little mix of both. There were definitely some awkward situations. Like I talked to my dad about it, who was a manager and had management training, and he like told me to put things in writing. So I had to write some really awkward emails like, please don't do that again.
I love that. Like, I love that you took that extra initiative to like document everything. And it's sad that you have to. I don't mean to laugh at that by any means, but like as someone who has also been in that situation, I feel you,
I'm not mad about it. Like, now I'm just happy that things have changed so much and that I work with so many amazing women now, and a ton of women in leadership. So I'm just really happy to like see how far things have come in the last 15 years.
And what is that like with all of those women in leadership? Like, I imagine there's drastic changes in just the day-to-day and like comfort level, like you're saying, but are there any other like very tangible differences that you're like, oh yeah, I never would have thought of that before, but now that I'm here, I fully see it?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think it's a lot of fun, first of all. And I think we could definitely talk about different things and relate on a different level. Like now that I have kids and everything, there are other moms, especially in leadership, that can totally relate to that. Like, have it like working longer hours sometimes, leaving your kids, stuff like that. So I think that's really helpful. Just have people to be able to relate to.
Just having those different perspectives is like so incredibly crucial.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really, really is, right? Like, and I'm curious, what is Element 84's policies on diversity, equity, inclusion, being all female founded and all female run, right? Like,
yeah, it's a husband and wife duo. So, but our president is a woman. She's amazing. And it's just great to have this role model. And then also on my NASA contract to have women role models there. So for ID&E, inclusion, diversity, and equity. So we started last summer-ish when things were crazy. We decided we really needed to do something. And then going back to, our values, which are we invest in each other, we are reliable and our work benefits our world. Like we really needed to do something with everything that was going on. So we started an ID&E committee. We have an executive coach who helps us run it. And I jumped on that right away because that was something that was really important to me. So we have a whole committee. We have done surveys, and we're really working to get like an inclusion statement together and address different topics. We have a mandatory inclusion training coming up that's being put together. So really just figuring out where we're at and how we're going to measure our progress. So we've done we have a bunch of positions open. So as we've done recruiting, the ID&E committee has been heavily involved in that because that's just so important, making sure that we're reaching out to different communities and, you know, being able to make our recruitment efforts inclusive because, of course, just like everybody else, everybody has blind spots. So yeah, really just like being intentional about working on that and knowing that this could be an issue for us. Like, let's see if it's an issue and let's do something about it rather than try to sweep it under the rug. So it's been really interesting for me because, to be honest, I don't know a lot. So it's been a huge learning experience for me, and it's definitely challenging, especially like reading through the survey results and all the different opinions. Cause like from my perspective, like I said, like things are so much better now than they used to be. So I'm really happy. And then there's going to be people who say like, there's no problem at all. There's going to be people who say there is a problem, and just, you know, putting that all together, it's just really interesting. It's a huge learning experience. So I think it's so eye-opening. I'm so happy we're doing it.
It's interesting what you're saying too, because it's kind of like in a past life, right? I was definitely 100% that same person in an awkward spot, and just like had a very low bar, I think, for myself anyway, speaking for myself only, but like a very low bar. And it's interesting to see, like, as I progressed in my career personally, how I personally raised that bar. But you're right, it's still so low for a lot of people. There's just such a small fair bit of it, but I fully agree. So if someone was looking to, you know, institute a DEI, or I believe you call that ID&E,
yeah, that's what we call it here,
at their company, where would you advise them to start?
Yep. So what we started with was first a survey that we put together just to kind of see like where baseline. I think that's a good place to start, to kind of see what issues are we struggling with, and then also look at the recruiting numbers. But we have a professional helping us. So I would say seek out, you know, at least some kind of advisor who has experience in this, because like, really none of us do. So I think it's really important to have kind of an outside, or I would say outside, because HR is great, but they're more company focused. To have somebody come in from the outside and really take a look at what's going on, like at that level, that's, you know, completely outside of it. I think that's really important to have that professional guidance, because and really keep us on task. So taking the survey results, presenting them to the company and doing something with them. I would say get somebody who has experience with ID&E programs. Because really, you know, I just show up and I'm like, you know, I don't know them. I'm just the girl, you know, like
I'm just the girl.
I'm a girl, so that's what I know. I mean, I know what I've been through. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it.
When you reflect back and you're like, oh, that was problematic. Yeah, no, yeah.
Yes, I could like figure out the problems. I could empathize, but like when it comes to really doing something about it, and you know, just be, you know, problems outside of just, you know, being a woman and those different experiences, it really helps to have somebody keeping us on track, for sure.
And I'm curious, if you don't mind sharing, what kind of questions are you asking on these sort of surveys? Is it just like, how comfortable are you? Or
yeah, so that's some of it. So one of them was, you know, do you feel comfortable being yourself at work? Has anybody told you you need to change something about yourself? What have you experienced a microaggression? And another interesting thing is things don't just come from inside the company. It could have been from a client or something. So, you know, I think we have a super open-minded company, but maybe, you know, in the past or something, a client has made a comment or something like that. Then that's just the kind of things that we need to know and keep an eye on. So there were, I forget how many questions there were, maybe 12, but do you feel like we have a diverse environment? Do you feel like we have an inclusive environment? And kind of separating those two, because, you know, diversity and inclusion are not the same thing.
For sure.
So
No,
that's what we
absolutely.
asked on the survey, to get a baseline of where we were at, and what we could work on. Something that also comes up is politics as well. So
Well,
people on different sides in a
it's
big election year.
yeah.
We did it last fall. So the election was a really hot topic.
Well, I feel like it probably will be in this country for a few more years at the bare minimum, right? And maybe for the next 10 or 20 years. But isn't it always? I don't know. But what you were saying about customers in particular, I kind of want to circle back to that for a hot second, because it's almost like the concept of a client kind of scope creeping you in a little bit of a way, right? Like if they're acting inappropriate in some way, like it's out of the scope of what you initially agreed to with that client. And I think acknowledging that as something that has happened and then declaring that with the client is such an important step. And I think a lot of people forget about it. So I want to highlight what you just said about talking to your clients if something doesn't match your culture, your policies. Like protecting your employees in that way is just so crucial and so important. So I love that you touched on that. I do want to circle back a little bit to your experience with NASA, because that's freaking amazing, but also your experience with Madden as well. Like, and I'm not even sure what to ask, quite honestly. I just want to hear more about it, but I also know there's probably some security and sensitivity to that. So could you tell us a little bit more about your project with NASA, or no?
Yeah, I can. So actually, all of the code is open source. So if you went and looked at my GitHub, you can find out a lot about it. We have public documentation and everything too. So you could like track me down on GitHub and see what I'm doing, and you would figure it out. So I work on a project called Cumulus, and what we're doing is providing components so that our end users can build themselves a data pipeline to get their data into the cloud. So it's all moving data into the cloud. And what that does is we have this like momentous amount of data in the cloud. You can put the compute next to it. So scientists, and I've talked to some, are like spending all this time downloading their data so that they can work on it. And by putting it into the cloud, we can eliminate that because they can put their processing code, it's all in AWS, and just spin up like a Lambda or EC2 in the same region as the data and access it that way. So there's a big push to get the data into the cloud, the satellite data, process it, then put that into the cloud. And yeah, so working on that.
And me not being the most technical resource, I'm just going to pretend that I understood every word of that.
Okay.
No, but it does sound, it sounds super interesting. And I'm sure that Carla is like furiously looking for your GitHub right now to drop that link. But in case she can't find it, would you be able to drop that for us? Awesome. Because I think that people would be really interested to see that. I think maybe people who are a little bit more technical than I am. But circling back a little bit to just your experience as a whole, what advice would you have to women who have maybe kind of followed the same path, kind of looking for their home, so to speak, right? And you said that you found your home with Element 84. I'm curious, what advice would you have for women who are looking for that?
Well, I think that, first of all, you don't need to stay in a crappy job with the market the way it is. I know you can move to a better situation, and like seriously, moving jobs sucks. Interviewing sucks. Resumes sucks. Cover letters, it all sucks. But if you're really looking to improve your situation, like first of all, now's the time to do it. But it's always worth the time. It's like you feel like you don't have time, but it's always worth the time. Like this job hunt, like that I did 5 years ago, like I still remember it because it was that emotionally taxing. It is, because there's so much to do, even though I love those programming tests they give you. Talking to people don't know.
I love you're just out here doing all the code challenges. Like, that's usually the most strenuous part for people, and they're so frustrated by it. You're like, just give me the code challenge. I'll prove it to you. It's fine.
I know, just give me the code challenge. I don't want to talk to anybody. Just give me the code challenge.
So while you were on that job search, was there anything in particular that you were looking for, right? Like, we all want a great culture, but what is a great culture?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I wanted to work from home. I turned down a job that couldn't guarantee me working from home because I had been working from home at my last job, and I was so super into it. Like, you know, I felt like I got so much done. So I was really looking to work from home. Now everybody's working from home, but back then, that's what I really wanted. Like, I wasn't looking like even title, money, like mostly looking for a good culture, and to work on like more cutting edge technology. So I wanted to be working on the cool stuff. I want to be getting experience, always looking for new experiences. And like, I really wanted to work from home, and that's really what I was looking for. And then as you get like farther in your career, it's like a little easier because you know what you want. It's a little harder to go find it. So you got to put a lot more effort into finding it. When you're coming out of college, you can kind of take, like, I kind of felt like, you know, there were a lot of opportunities to kind of go in whatever direction. Then when you get more advanced in your career, it's a little harder to find like those really high level opportunities and stuff. But yeah, I had like those two things that I was really looking for, and I like was going to find them because I'm not going to leave like a decent job to go to something that doesn't fit my criteria.
I love that. I think I'm going to end up quoting that for our social media sometime. I love it. And I know part of the thing that caught my ear the last time that we talked is that you and your husband's journeys have been kind of in line with one another. Could you speak to that a little bit and just kind of...
Yeah. So when we both worked at EA, which is kind of where we really met in downtown Orlando, but they're mutual friends. But anyways,
so still in the Jim and Pam situation, but not really. It's fine.
we worked on the same floor and didn't know each other, but because he worked on golf and I worked on football, and we did not mix.
So you're the alpha is really what you're saying here. Got it.
I was working on the cool stuff. So actually I made more money than him back then, like slightly more. We were both like the same level, and he kind of took like a different path. I always took like the big company, stable jobs. I always like carried all the health insurance and everything. And he always went for cool opportunities, to go learn a bunch of stuff. So I always like aired towards stability, all that, took the safe route, while he kind of got to take, you know, a different, like, I don't know if I want to say more, it's not really more exciting, but like maybe more adventurous route. And that totally like actually fits our personalities. So it's completely fine. But then we actually did end up back at E84 together for a little bit. And now we're both directors of engineering at different companies. So
different pathways, kind of the same endpoint.
They kind of converged at the end.
I love that. And I think it kind of shows, right? Like, no matter where you start, it's really more about the focus of where you want to be and getting there, right? And a lot of people have different journeys, regardless of gender, race, anything, right? Like, everyone has their own journey, and it's really about kind of focusing in on what you want, understanding that, and then really going after it. Right. And I think that's kind of what you were telling me, what both you and your husband have kind of done at this point, right?
Yeah, and it changes, like what you want changes like throughout your life. Like I totally didn't know, let's say even 5 years ago, like I always hated setting goals at work because I'm like, can somebody just tell me, like, I'll do whatever, just tell me what to do. So, you know, your goals definitely changed. Like when I had kids, I thought I was going to be, you know, take a little slower route, and then a lead position to open up. And I'm like, no, I want that. So, you know, it just changes. It changes. Like I always wanted to lead a team for a really long time. And then I did that. I'm like, okay, you know, need something else to do. So it just changes as you get into different jobs that have different opportunities, you know, talk to different people who can kind of open your eyes to a different opportunity that's out there. So
but just know that and be okay with it, right? Like change is fine. Changing what you want is fine, right? Oh. One last question for you before we move on to Carolyn. what do you have any resources that might be useful for women in technology of any kind of, I mean, background or anything that you found helpful during your journey?
Yeah, so really, I use my personal network a lot. I don't think I'm necessarily good at networking. Also, the pandemic has given me like a huge excuse not to be good at networking, but I try to leverage my personal network and have just people connect me with friends and stuff like that. So it's not like I'm out at events necessarily like chatting up strangers, because I'm not really good at that. But even like my husband at his different jobs, like I've asked him to connect me with women at his jobs and stuff. So I'm big on like not even just the people you know, but the people that they know. There was a COO once that he connected me with, and she was generous enough to like have an hour chat with me to just talk about my career. And it's just somebody total third party that can just give me that advice. So, yeah, I would say, look, you're the friends of friends, wives of coworkers, stuff like that. I've used a ton of that.
But just like leverage what's right in front of you, right? I think that's
right.
Fantastic advice. With that, do you mind if we drop your LinkedIn link in the chat so people can connect with you?
Sure, awesome. Totally, yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Lauren. We will pull you on for the Q&A at the end, but we're going to bring on Carolyn now. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and pull Carolyn on. And any questions, as a reminder, any questions or comments that y'all have, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We will be doing a Q&A for about 15 minutes towards the end. Hey, Carolyn, how's it going?
Hey, good. Hi, everyone.
Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey in technology?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here and happy to answer any questions that people have in the chat and later. But a little about me. I am currently the product lead at IFundWomen. IFundWomen is a go-to funding platform for women entrepreneurs, providing access to capital, coaching, and connections. So we can help them start, launch, grow their career. And we'll talk a bit more about IFundWomen later. But about my history, I've worked in product management for around 8 years. I initially started in marketing roles. In college, I had my own business, supporting entrepreneurs as they explored and identified their product market fit. Ultimately, I realized that in order to have your own business, I felt it was necessary to understand how to basically like be perfect, if you will. I felt as though I wasn't an expert in the space I was in. And so there was just a lot of potential to learn more. And so with that in mind, I ended up working at a couple corporate companies, probably a lot of people are familiar with. So I worked at Intuit TurboTax for a little bit. I was fortunate enough to be able to try a couple different roles there and primarily spent my time working in sort of like a little incubator innovation space. And I received a patent for one of my designs there. So just really interesting to work in that space where you're talking to customers, interviewing them, and just really understanding the importance that the customer is the one using your product or your services. And you always have to go back to them and make sure that whatever you're doing and building is just constantly audited. But at that point, working in software was not necessarily something that I thought I would do. I'm not a huge technical expert, but I am a curious person. And so I would say at that point, my like technical side interest was piqued. And so after that, I worked at a small software company in the area that I grew up. And I had our Facebook and Instagram ads product integration. And then ultimately I moved to Seattle. I worked at Amazon for about 5 years in a variety of different roles. Again, we can dive into all of these details. But before I left Amazon, I was sitting on sort of like a strategy team. So I helped define the business strategies for the media products. So focusing on photos, video, music, etc. Thinking about how to launch and grow their businesses and think about, again, the shifting state of customers, especially during COVID, and how does that impact the business and the product offerings and being able to pivot accordingly. Ultimately, during my time at Amazon, I it's a long time to be at a company, kind of like what, you guys were talking about before, 5 years. And so at that point, and again, just during COVID, I didn't really feel like it was something that felt authentically myself working there anymore. And so I started to look for a small company where I thought I could grow in a role. Being a woman, very interested in the space of helping other women. That's just something I feel very passionate about because I've experienced difficulties and challenges. So I want to either like prevent that or just help other women identify ways to, I guess, sort of get rid of roadblocks in their way. So that's how I ended up finding IFundWomen on Angel List, I believe. Clicked apply, connected with our CEO, who was amazing. We hit it off, fell in love, if you will. And yeah, I've been at the company since January, and I absolutely love it. And just really excited to dive into, DE&I. There's so many interesting topics there. And also, if you have any questions around, a little bit of the difference between startup versus corporate, happy to talk about those too.
I love it. Very, very condensed. So much information there to unpack. But I think first and foremost, I love what you're bringing up about Amazon, because I feel like you were with Amazon, correct me if I'm wrong, for like such a crucial time period, right? Like during COVID at Amazon, it has to be absolutely insane, right? Like, can you tell me a little bit? We hadn't talked about this much previously, but I'm curious, what was your time with Amazon like? I mean, that's an insane time to be at Amazon, and Amazon's such a widely known name, I'm just curious.
It's really interesting, especially being such a well-known name that everyone's going to follow sort of the trends that they set / Amazon actually ended up following trends that other big companies set, which I kind of felt like was a miss for the company a bit, especially being one that, services so many different customers and things. I think they were overall a bit slower than I would have liked to have seen from a company with such resources that they have. But obviously, as I'm sure everyone is aware, like they were able to accomplish all these amazing things and adjust their delivery speeds and, get people the resources that they need. And that's really great from that perspective. To me, it kind of felt like a company that didn't really walk the walk, talk the talk, was disconnected a little bit. But I mean, there's so many unknowns during COVID. And so I also think that, from that perspective, everyone's just trying to make it through and navigate through all the unknowns and learning from, any failures or opportunities for improvement.
Sure. Yeah. And to kind of contrast from that, right, how has IFundWomen been going for you from that perspective, right? Do you feel like they're, doing all of the things that they could be doing and really hitting the ground running? Or are you still seeing kind of those struggles?
Gosh, I feel like I sound so, like, I don't know the right word, a little mean saying this, but IFundWomen is so amazing.
I don't think that's mean at all.
Same other companies. But honestly, IFundWomen for a startup, we move so incredibly quick, and we are so keen to listening to what our customers have to say. So in particular, an example is we launched a program called IFundWomen of Color. Granted, this wasn't necessarily in reaction to some of the events that happened during COVID. However, I would say it was sort of an accelerated time period because of the events that have happened during COVID for people of color. And so IFundWomen of Color really focuses on the fact that not only do women-led businesses receive less than 3% of venture funding, which is nuts already, but women of color get less than 1%. So there's just an even bigger gap and challenge to overcome. And one thing that, IFundWomen really did was be really quick to think on their feet and launch a program. And it has grown immensely over the past few years. Shout out to Olivia, who is running that. And we're just like growing and connecting with a variety of different partners to really focus in on what needs and gaps that women of color have, because everyone has a different need, you know, men, women, but also women of color versus women that are not of color. And so it's really important to just really be in tune with those things.
It's so interesting that you bring that up too, because our first Women for Women talk, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, it was quite a while ago, back in like March or something. So if anybody attending here today doesn't recall this one statistic, I won't be offended. But we were talking with Michelle Quacchion's Flick, which is an organization that is specifically targeted around women in technology as well, or women founders, I should say. And one of the statistics that she brought up was how I believe it was 83% of new businesses started in the prior year, like 2019 or 2020, were women of color, and that they had received less than 1% of funding. And it absolutely blew my mind. And I have not stopped thinking about it ever since. So I just want to fully reinforce that concept. Snaps for you, snaps for IFundWomen. I absolutely love that y'all are doing that. But I know that one of the things that we had talked about that IFundWomen offers and how they help is this coaching program. Could you speak to that coaching program a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just a little bit of context for everyone listening. So IFundWomen really focuses in on, again, helping women entrepreneurs get funding. And so part of the ability to get funding involves many different things. And so we found out that oftentimes people think that they're at a place where they want venture capital or they need angel investors. However, they really skip so many crucial steps before that, because either they think, oh, I've worked at a corporate company, I've done it, or I've been doing this for so long, or this idea is so great, everyone tells me this idea is so great, or just they're really well connected and have money to kind of play with. And so we have this coaching program, which ultimately teaches our IFundWomen method playbook. And the idea is to offer a variety of different coaching sessions that people can sign up and register for. We offer either monthly or annual plan, and you can sign up, talk to a specialist that focuses in on a certain topic so that you're able to make sure that you are set up for success before you get to that next step or that next stage, if you will. And so specifically, you know, a lot of people, again, think they're at the place to just go have a conversation and pitch something. We see that that's not really the case. It's really hard to articulate, you know, what problem you're solving, why you are the best to solve it, what, you know, the market opportunity is. And so our coaching services are just really focused on helping people just walk through those things, really help get clarity. And we're excited to see how we continue to develop that program.
Well, and, you know, to quote Eminem, you get one shot, right? Like every conversation that you have, you want to put your best foot forward. So why not do it, those kind of like coaching exercises and things like that? Anything you can do to put yourself over the top, right? I know last time we were talking, I'm totally setting you up for like a little tea here, but one of the things we talked about is how likely women are to get funding after the coaching sessions with y'all. What was the statistic behind that?
I love that you're setting me up for that tea. Yeah, so we've actually done some analysis, and we've seen people that have actually gone through our coaching program or obtained some of our coaching services. We see that they end up raising over 27x more than the average. So for example, if you just went to Kickstarter or something like that, other crowdfunding platforms, we see that our customers, our women-led businesses, are raising over 27x that average, which is huge.
27 times. I'm just gonna let that resonate for a hot second. That blew my mind when you told me that. It was very much a Flick moment for me, like we had in our first episode. So I really appreciate that you brought that up, or that we're talking about that rather. But anyway, I got off topic thinking about that. But kind of circling back to how else IFundWomen can help. If someone's just starting out and they're kind of like unsure, what would be the next step? Would that be just straight into coaching, or is there some kind of evaluation period or something where they can say, okay, I'm really not sure what to do. Carolyn, can you just help me?
Oh my gosh. This is just like the best little promo file. Okay.
I try, you know.
Ready? You go to ifundwomen.com/get started. We actually have something called the IFundWomen assessment. So you answer a couple questions about, you know, where you're at with your business, and the Then we evaluate you based on our expertise, what stage you are actually in. And so, again, I mentioned some people are like, oh yeah, I'm proven demand. I have like money and customers. And then we go, you don't even have a website. So you are not like, you may think, you know, you're getting money, but like you really skipped such a critical step. So we need to take it back a notch and get you forward. So take that assessment. It takes 1 or 2 minutes. And we provide you a custom set of resources available for you. And we offer a variety of free and paid resources. So anyone can go there and use them.
I love that. I love that. And I know probably, Carla, you're looking for the link right now, but if you could drop that link for us, I'd really appreciate it. Couple of other things that I see that we're getting close to time. So the DEI initiatives that you have run in the past, I would love any advice that you have on DEI initiatives, or as Lauren calls them, ID and E initiatives. I've never heard it phrased that way, but however you phrase it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so during my time at Amazon, I worked on the teams that are super large. And so I would say I was fortunate enough to be able to attend Grace Hopper. For those that aren't familiar with it, Grace Hopper is the largest women in computing conference. It's really competitive to be able to get a ticket, but it's primarily centered around women that are specialized in computer science or engineering, something of that nature. And all people go and you get to learn about certain topics. So I was fortunate enough to be able to be sponsored by Amazon to go. And I came back and gave presentations on some of the things I learned. A couple interesting things I learned, and I would say helped sort of move my organization and my partner organizations along, is talking about and really defining for people what is diversity, what is equity, what is inclusion, because oftentimes they do get muddled. There's also a lot of education that has to go into bias and unconscious bias. I think largely, especially again at like really big companies, reading people's resumes when they apply. An interesting thing I learned is that a lot of people might see someone's name on a resume and then they might just say, like, unconsciously sort of set it aside because they associate the name with a certain knowledge or a certain skill set without actually looking at the criteria, right? And so there's just a lot of unconscious things that happen. People make split-second decisions. So a lot of the DE&I work that I've done previously has been focused on education and also facilitating conversations that can be really uncomfortable, talking about and making sure people have the opportunity to feel heard. You guys were previously talking about the idea of, oh, I didn't know that was going on. And it's really interesting because I thought this was happening, but then those people thought that was happening. So everyone has their own perspective. And so it's, again, really interesting at a larger company because they're here and they only know what's going on here and they don't know what's going on here. And so I think there's a bit of a disconnect and like a lack of an auditing mechanism, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You know, some people just really index here. Some people are indexed here. And so I think there's an opportunity for like an index on, are people feeling included? Are people not feeling included? So sort of that survey tactic is a great example and something that I've done as well.
Well, and like you're saying, right, doing that at every single level, especially if you're a larger company and you might be disconnected from someone in a totally separate department or whatever it is, right? Making sure that every single voice is heard and not just like managers or directors or whatever it might be, right? I think that's a fantastic point. I was hoping that we could talk a little bit more about your experience in startup versus corporate, but we are running out of time. So I have one question here left for you.
Okay.
Do you have any specific resources or advice for women in technology at any level, at any time, just anything in your life personally that helped you?
So many. Well, first of all, I do actually have a blog post, I believe, specifically on my website, which is innovationchangent.com, or you can look up my LinkedIn and it's connected there. But I talk about my experience as an entrepreneur in residence when I went to Europe. And it's really eye-opening to be able to experience different cultures and understand so many of the different nuances of that impact how people perceive you, but then also how you present yourself and how, you know, how that just like plays a role in terms of how people grew up. I experienced a lot of like ageism and sexism throughout just my journey, much I'm sure so many of the people listening have as well. And I've learned that just speak up. And that's one thing I feel can be super intimidating. But if I am to give like one piece of advice for everyone listening, it's document, speak up about the issue, because likely it has been something that's been going on for a long period of time. And it's also likely that it's happened to other people. And so if it doesn't get said and doesn't get acknowledged, then it goes away and it's swept under the rug. So there has to be that like tracking and accountability. But again, I could go off on these sort of things for a long time. Maybe we can dive into it a bit more in Q&A.
Yeah, I think we will have some time to dive into it in Q&A. I do have a couple of questions here. If anybody has any more questions, please feel free to drop those now. I'm going to pull Lauren on screen and we'll get started with the Q&A section. Give me just 1 second here. Okay. Hey, Lauren. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a few questions for both of you. So first, what is the best piece of professional advice that you've ever received for both of y'all?
I can go. So when I came out of college and went into my first job at EA, I wouldn't talk ever, like in meetings. I would only talk one-on-one to people. And I had my manager take me aside and tell me that I needed to start speaking up. And even just that little thing, like for somebody to take me aside and tell me you have to talk in meetings, it is the best piece of advice I have gotten, because as you're growing in your career, you're kind of evaluated on your sphere of influence, and not just influencing yourself and being a good engineer, but also how you can influence the team, the company, et cetera. So your voice being heard is really important. Asking questions, it's really important. When all I would do is like sit there and listen. So that changed me.
Love it. What about you, Carolyn?
Yeah, I'll go along the same vein. And I will say the best piece of advice I got was from one of my mentors, Michelle, who heads design over at Amazon. And she would be someone I would vent to if I was having difficulties, or just, you know, an ear to listen to. And one thing that she told me, I remember initially feeling a bit annoyed by this feedback, because I like to think of myself being a filtered person. But the best piece of advice she gave me is think before you speak. And so an example of this really ties into the fact that women are often perceived as being very emotional. And so anything can impact that, you know, a slight eye roll, a slight like little smirk, whatever. All those little things are sort of extra perceived, if that makes sense. And so in meetings, I am kind of the opposite. I'm a very vocal person because that's just my nature. And so I think that can be abrupt for people, but it's kind of also picking your battles wisely, in the sense of, do you need to be the person that says that? Why do you need to say this? Is this the right setting to say this? And so those are sort of some of the key things that I still bring to my current role and are going to ever stick with me.
I feel like you two together on this could write a book about how to be a boss without being bossy or something like that. You know what I mean? Like that classic trope of like a woman speaks up and she's bossy kind of thing. I totally get what you're both saying,
Well,
honestly.
I'm bossy now.
So I totally hear you. Okay.
No, I'm super direct.
All right, we'll do it.
You actually personally used to be an extremely quiet individual, and I really sort of found my voice in college, and my voice got a little too loud. So I'm honestly on both spectrums. I feel you both. But all right, let's see. What advice would you give specifically to young professionals starting out in technology? And this is again for both of y'all.
I can go first.
Go ahead.
We can switch it. I would say ask a lot of questions. And this is something that they don't really teach you in school. And so I would say I had to learn this on the job quickly, of asking all sorts of questions. Being curious is really what it comes down to. Allowing yourself to explore certain areas, even if it doesn't necessarily seem interesting, because something may pique your interest and you need to be open to just exploring that. So I would say that that's one thing.
That's a really good one. I'm going to piggyback off of that a little bit and say, in addition to just asking a lot of questions, know when to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help as long as you're willing to try things. I know this is like kind of maybe more programming oriented, but as long as you're willing to try things and know when to ask for help, not spin your wheels, and not come back with the same question again and again and again. Like, we love on our team when people ask questions, when they ask for help, especially a newcomer to the team. Everybody's thrilled to help. So just feel like, you can reach out to the team and ask for help.
I remember I had a boss, and I use that word very intentionally, a while back, who told me that I should never approach him with questions. I should only approach him with answers. And it kind of broke me for a hot second. So I would like to reiterate both of those pieces of advice. Always ask for help, but at the same time, try to solve it yourself. But don't be afraid to ask questions, right? And I think there's like that fine line in between that. But never let anybody tell you, like they told me, right? Don't ask questions. Always ask questions. I think that's great advice. All right, we have one more question here. Oh, it looks like it's for Lauren in particular. What do you look for when you interview people? Oh, looking specifically for a culture fit.
Okay. Yeah. So for culture fit, the first thing is alignment with the mission. Element 84 has a really strong mission with our work benefiting our world and the kind of work that we choose to take on. So I want to find somebody who's actually really interested in the mission. And those interviews are the ones that always stand out to me, where someone's excited about the mission. The other thing is I love... I could listen to people tell their life story all day, but like anybody who brings like a different perspective, like that's something that's totally interesting for me. Like if somebody has like, totally like unique perspective, I'm all about it. I would just sit there and listen all day long to that. So I really like that. But like for a culture fit at Element 84, you need to be like excited to try new things. I think not very rigid and like not very rigid in that, like, you're willing to try something new, try new technologies, and just overall excited to do that. Not somebody who's, coming in as a know-it-all, somebody who's coming in to learn. Because we have such an amazing group of people with so much different experience that I think it's super fun to learn from everybody. So I like, somebody who's going to have that attitude.
I love that one of our values here at Tango talks about how we understand the limits of a singular perspective. And so we want the collective perspective and want to share out and understand things together. So I absolutely love that. I think it vibes with our internal culture as well. I know the question was originally directed at you, Lauren, but Carolyn, I'd love your thoughts on that as well. What kind of defines a good culture fit for IFundWomen?
Yeah, I mean, I think almost any company is going to think about mission, especially for us, because we are very focused in sort of like a niche space, serving like a very specific audience. But along the same lines, being at the stage that IFundWomen is at, it's the idea of someone who is just willing to get in there, get their hands dirty, try all sorts of different things, be sort of like a self-starter, be able to sort of mold into different roles if needed, but also has the potential to grow into the company. I think ultimately, though, it's really just has a story or interest or some sort of connection with our mission. Although we do have a very robust interview process and, evaluate many different things. And culture is just one bit of it. So.
Gotcha. And we do have another question specifically for you, Carolyn. Are there any stories that come to mind with IFundWomen that really moved you?
Stories?
Yeah, just stories of your clients, right? Of women who have come to you and have just seen drastic changes. I imagine there's thousands, right? But is there any one in particular that has really sparked an interest in you?
That's a great question. I would actually say there's so many. It's really hard for me to choose, and I feel like I shouldn't because there's so many. We actually have a alumni page that sort of highlights some of our success stories, if you will. So I would suggest checking that out for whomever asked the question. To me, this person may be curious about success story in terms of the funding that they received, but I actually find more of a interesting or success story in the personal story of some of the challenges an entrepreneur has overcome. And that really only translates during our coaching calls. I myself have been on coaching calls where people are crying, they're overwhelmed, they have a lot of stuff going on, they're trying to do a little bit of everything everywhere, and they're just overwhelmed. And I love being able to stay connected to those people and to see them grow and to hear their updates, because they kind of end up feeling like family. People talk to us, they learn, they grow, they take actions, and they come back and they're so excited because they're like, I did what you told me, and like this happened. I actually find those like small little wins to be a lot more rewarding because it feels so much more personal, I suppose.
Oh, I love that. I kind of want to hear all the stories now. But okay, so since we do have a few minutes left and I don't have any other questions, I would love to talk with both of you about your perspective on kind of startup versus corporate life. What might be the right decision for either of you that want to start, but just a little bit of information about maybe somebody who's looking at like the startup world versus the corporate world and trying to make a decision on where they fit.
I'm happy to answer quickly. So I guess to me, I found it really valuable to work at a corporate company or like a larger, more established company after working at a startup initially. I thought a startup was a great place for me because I was interested in so many different areas. I wasn't exactly sure what type of role I wanted to move into. And so in working for a startup, again, you kind of get to touch so many different fields and work with so many different people that there really is an opportunity to say, actually, I want to move more that route. And so it's sort of fine tuning your areas of interest. Whereas working at a corporate company, I felt that was more really becoming like an expert in that thing that you chose. And so I found that I really enjoyed, at a younger age or sort of first out of college, being like a little unsure, going to that startup, like specializing in a corporate company, and then moving back to a startup where I've learned and developed. And now I am like being an expert in this area, and now I can teach and manage other people on my team in that domain. So it's kind of like a circular experience, if you will.
Love it.
I think for me, it's hard for me to comment on small company versus large company. I've been at 3 large ones, 1 small one, but I think at larger companies, the team culture is so important, the team that you're joining. So I think like regardless if you're looking at small companies or big companies, look at the team culture. Like just because it's a large corporate place doesn't mean you can't have like a small, cool team. You have a lot of flexibility to like move around to if it's not a great team. But I really I prefer the small company because like Carolyn said, I really like doing a bunch of different things, and there's so many opportunities to learn new things and do different things. So I really like that part of it. But I don't think it has to be, you have to really tie yourself down to one or the other for your career. I think like really team culture is probably the most important thing.
Well, and I mean, to your point, right, that's a full spectrum. It's not really just startup over here and corporate over here. There's such a big spectrum in there, right? So Absolutely love it. And we are at the top of the hour. Unfortunately, I have to let you ladies go, but thank you so much for joining, and thank you for all of the information on DEI, your past experience, your advice. This call will be recorded. We'll throw it on our YouTube, advertise it on our social media, and everyone who attended, including you two lovely ladies, will receive a copy of that recording. So if you have any questions or any ideas for speakers to follow up, please let us know. But thank you, ladies, so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank
All right.
you so much.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.